I am Halli Casser-Jayne, and welcome to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, a smart, witty, and timely podcast brought to you at a time when Americans are getting fed up with all the shouting and bickering in Washington, D.C. So I, Halli Casser-Jayne, and veteran White House correspondent Matthew Cooper are here to offer you an insightful, engaging journey into the world of politics, always with a smile and dialogue that snap, crackles, and pops. And with our very special guests, we strive to offer a different take on all things politics in our weekly conversations. So pour yourselves a martini, grab a spot on your favorite sofa, and have a listen as we tackle it all and like to stir, and yes, sometimes shake things up. On this episode of the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, in the continuing saga of the Donald J. Trump presidency, Michael Bloomberg chooses to become a kingmaker rather than a presidential candidate. The Democrats play footsie with socialism. Does Representative Ilhan Omar have an anti-Semitic problem? House Democrats open a sweeping corruption probe into Trump's world, and a look at the life of Theodore Roosevelt with historian David Pietruszas and his book, TR's Last War, Theodore Roosevelt, The Great War, and a Journey of Triumph and Tragedy. Those stories, and we're just beginning. Here we go. So, Matthew, another week, darling.
Totally.
I thought
Another
this week was going to be...
city.
Yeah, right. And I thought this was like, kind of like chugging along, kind of dull. And then all of a sudden today, things got like a little bit interesting. It all started to pull itself together. But before we get into the, meat of it all, I want to discuss the fact that Michael Bloomberg has taken himself out of the race for the presidency. And yet, it's my opinion that he has put himself into it in a bigger and more powerful way. A, he's got money up the yin-yang.
Sure.
B, I think he's making himself a kingmaker. And then I think the most powerful part of this whole thing is, like so many of the more adult Democrats in the room, if you will, if you want to call him a Democrat, he's moderate, and he is concerned about the Democratic Party moving too far to the left, and I think he will help to pull it back to the center. And then, of course, there's Biden. My thoughts on Michael Bloomberg. I do think it was a big moment in the race, because I think it opens up kind of like, the red carpet for Mr. Biden. Your thoughts?
I agree with that. He's still, firstly, as you said, he's got a lot of money, and he can still influence things. He's very much in the mainstream of the party on guns and, some issues like that. On others, like taxes, economics, not so much. This party's changed a lot and won't care a lot about what he says. But I think the greatest significance is that this makes it easier for Biden to step in, and Biden seems to want to, and Biden's holding up other people. I think Terry McAuliffe, former governor of Virginia, will get in if Biden does not. So we have a little traffic jam at the Holland Tunnel right now.
So are you thinking,
it's a little bit of clogging,
a little bit of backed up vehicles there? But I'm wondering whether you think that Biden what's the holdup here?
I think it's the same thing as last time to some degree without the immediacy of his son's death, but still the same calculation. Do I want to lose for the fourth time or whatever, trying to be the president? Does this party still fit me? Am I vigorous enough? Who knows? I mean, he's got to, put his son's problems out there, his son Hunter, who'd had drug issues and other things. He may not want to do that. We'll see if he goes for it. If he doesn't, there are others who want to take space.
Yeah, I think one thing I want to bring up about him, and that is this, because I'm watching this, and you're watching this, and we're watching people just adore this man. The Democratic Party has been very unforgiving of people who run and lose.
Right.
Not Joe. They keep giving Joe, come on back, Joe, one more time. Do it as VP. Do it as... Hillary? One shot,
no.
Goodbye. I think that's very interesting. And they're even being cruel to Bernie in a way. Bernie does not have the
No, there's no question. He's kind of getting an open ticket. I don't know if it's because of the death of his son kind of created a space for that, or Obama nostalgia or whatever. But yeah, I think he does get a more forgiving track. But he gets in. He's got a lot to talk about from with this Democratic Party. I mean, I see he got grief last week from Cynthia Nixon calling Mike Pence a decent guy.
Right, which is kind of I think that's the.
This is
that
where
just
we're
says
at
it all.
now.
That says it all
this
about
is where
the
we're
party.
at now.
Yeah. And I think that's definitely problematic. I could spend hours on it, and we'll be talking about him more because this is we're just beginning in all of this. So I want to get to what really happened this week that I think is very powerful, and I think it's being misread by many deliberately on the Republican side, and I'm just worried about where we're on the Democratic side, and that is the House opened an obstruction probe sending out 81 letters. Oh my God. 81 letters.
That's big.
I don't think I've written that many letters in my entire life. Jerry Nadler, he's not kidding. He's just not kidding. And I'm wondering, is it a pre-impeachment? Is it fair? Is it overreach? I mean, whoa.
Well, I don't think it's wrong to think of it that way. I mean, they're going to make a decision later about impeachment, but I think, they're getting a sense that they already have enough to seriously consider impeachment. And that's before they get the Mueller report and whatever comes from all these other hearings. So look, it's whatever label you give it, it's a really deep investigation. And, they're kind of good at it. They're good at investigating. Whereas I think the Republicans are sort of the gang that couldn't shoot straight on all their, Benghazi and all the whatnots. I think you got a pretty slick team here.
I think so too, and I think one of the things that we, Trump's response, presidential harassment or harassment, however you say that word.
The real issue is whether he's going, to what degree is he going to comply?
How he's not going to comply at all. I think that.
Well, I know he's been pretty good about complying with the council and others.
Yeah, but today that story changed. I mean, not Junior, the other one, Eric came out and said Stonewall.
Well, let's see where we go with that.
Yeah, I think that
would he defy a court order on stuff like that? So,
how about this? I almost got the feeling, Matt, that Trump is more afraid of the Dems than he is of Mueller.
Well, there's a logic to that. Mueller is more circumscribed about the Russia stuff. And the Dems are, traipsing through, the Trump organization and all its madness. The taxes, the shell companies, whatnot. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, we know for Trump, the red line has always been the tax returns, and now they do seem determined to use the House Ways and Means Committee to get the returns.
Yeah, I think they're, absolutely. They're going to get that. There's no question in my mind about that. They also did some good hiring. Former Manhattan prosecutor they hired, who specializes in Russian organized crime. I think
they
are like kicking him in the balls, baby.
They're kind of getting the A team, and there used to be a time as recently as the 90s when the Republicans, when they had an investigative committee, would tend to hire pretty sharp lawyers, and they didn't really do that with all the faux Obama scandals.
And this is going to take a long time, though. I mean, that's the thing. I think, people have the patience to stick with this and see this through, because it's going to take up to 2020 just to get these 81 people in and do all the kind of stuff that they're going to do. And I think people really, really, really wanting, it's for sure. Give me something. If it's not collusion, give me something real now. I'm worried the Democrats are not going to sit by and watch this with patience.
They can blow it. I mean, my former congressman growing up, Peter Rodino of New Jersey, was chairman of the House Judiciary Committee during Watergate. He was, very intent on having a, in sadness, not in anger tone to the impeachment hearings, never wanting to seem like there was bluster. I don't know how many Democrats are going to be able to control themselves that way.
Well, that's my point. I think it's it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out, because it's 2 years of this, and we're nowhere where we're right back where we were in the beginning. Really, yeah. I mean, it is.
In general, they did pretty well on the hearing with Cohen.
They did great, but
Cummings was very good, and AOC was good. And
I agree, but the thing is results. And
Yeah.
I think that's the issue here. Somebody gives some results to keep these people going. I got to move on. I want to move on to two little things that happened, but I think that they're pretty powerful, and that was Trump floating a pardon for Michael Cohen. I mean, that's an issue that's now just kind of bubbled up out of nowhere, and him influencing the AT&T Time Warner deal.
Well, on the latter, this is the most ineffectual episode of revenge politics we've seen. I mean, he'd been threatening this merger since 2016. The thing basically sailed through. There was token opposition from the Justice Department, but they didn't really seem to have their heart in it. They pulled out by the end, and, the deal went through last week. And officially, I mean, he made a lot of noise, but he didn't really do anything about it.
Doesn't he always make a lot of noise and not necessarily do anything about it?
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
I think people give him
Remember
more credit than he deserves.
Remember at the beginning of the term, he was going to, screw Boeing.
Yeah. I mean, there's all of that. He was always, and then
Ford Motor, I'm going to make them, they're not going to be able to sell a car here.
He's a lot of, BS. What was the word he used at CPAC? BS, or was it?
Oh, bullshit.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We're not on broadcast network.
I know, but
bullshit.
yeah, well, we can and we can't. They get mad at us on iHeart if we do
okay,
that. So.
BS.
BS. Look, that's who he is. I mean, he's all show and very little action. I mean, you can even talk about that one. Let's talk about it as long as it came up right now on the vote to stop Trump's emergency declaration. So a few Republicans are going to vote.
Yeah, well, it's something.
It's certainly a step in it, but I don't think it signals any great move away from Trump at all.
No, there's no defection. There's no big use of people's influence to try to change things.
But I want to bring this up to you. I've been dying to talk to you about this all week because this is interesting to me. So now he's got it, and now it comes up to the vote. It's not going to pass. He's going to veto it, and there we go. There he's left with this, and he's basically bought himself time. But what I find fascinating all of this is, when was the last time you heard the word wall out of Donald Trump in the last few weeks?
Wall. Wall, yeah. Right. Well, it's a beautiful barrier.
Well, what it is that this is all that he wanted. So now, let it fly off into the sunset. Goodbye. We don't have to. This isn't an issue. I got away with it. The base believes me. Later rather than sooner, you're gonna get your damn wall. I think it needs to be looked at in that respect. Did he win this one? He may have won this one by being clever by half. What are your thoughts?
Well, it puts it calms the hardliners a little bit on this question for now. But I don't know. I mean, I think the Hannity Galters are holding his feet to the fire a bit on this, so he's not going to get away with no wall.
He's not going to get a wall. This thing is going to be in the courts for the till the
no,
next election.
But he's got to get something.
Well,
and the emergency thing gives him something. He can say, "Look, I declared an emergency."
Right? No, that's what I'm saying. I mean, all it did was buy him time and cover. What's the old line? You could cross the street and what was that crazy thing that he said? That's so true. No, they're up to 90% sticking with him through all of the facts that are coming out about what a crazy man he is. Not to mention his 2-hour performance. Did you see any of that at CPAC?
I watched off and on. I did not watch the full 2-hour festival.
Well, for sure, I didn't watch it for 2 hours, but I just had to go through, the greatest hits from there, and I am sorry. Tell me how anybody can take this man seriously or not get turned off by him or find this amusing and not find this pathetic or say something.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I think people like the unplugged unfiltered 2-hour El Presidente Castro. Central America, right?
I know Central America, and I never saw any of even the worst, Rios Montt or any of the other
proceed
strong
to the
men.
buses.
ever act
buses
like
will leave for the Ministry of Information.
Oh my God, I never listen. This is just so beyond the pale. And I discovered something today about which I found interesting, and that is I think I may have a clue as to some of what is going on with these 90% approval ratings with this dude, besides the fact that, their egos are so invested that they're never going to walk away from him. But I have some very old good friends of mine who I adore, besides the fact that they happen to support this bozo.
Right.
And I put up a picture, the one where he's hugging, the flag, which I found quite insulting, which I thought was insulting. I took that as that was he doesn't like the football players getting down on their knee. What? Yeah. And then there's this thing, he's hugging it was the Me Too movement. The flag screams back, Me Too.
Right. Yes. Me too. Well, stop touching me.
And I used this very dear friend of mine whose name I won't mention because I didn't ask her permission to, but if you follow me on Facebook, you'll find her all the time. She said, I thought it was hysterical. And that's what it is. I think part of Donald Trump's thing is that we have different sense of humors. Like I did a show a couple of weeks ago on farce, and I'm doing one on wit, because I think that at hand may be how we perceive him also might have to do with our level of what we find funny and what we don't find funny. Now, I wasn't a fan of the Three Stooges. I just couldn't get them. I don't find him amusing.
Yeah.
Do you?
I think he's had his moments at times, but mostly not.
Okay. So could it be that people's perception of him is based on the fact that some people find him amusing and other people find him absolutely like they want to throw up? And that determines what they think about him.
Well, I think that's certainly a case of the rally where it's like it's like going to a WWF or
right.
It's entertainment.
Which I could never, I couldn't tolerate 5 seconds of that without being, like I don't like NASCAR either. And I find that most of the people, by the way, who I know who love Trump also love NASCAR.
Well,
so maybe there's something there, right?
Well, yeah, NASCAR's gotten pretty upscale, but yeah.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying? I mean, it didn't start out as upscale, as we both know.
Didn't start out that way.
No. So WE, that doesn't appeal to. So maybe that's what, I don't know. I'm just looking for, because it's just so hard to comprehend why they wouldn't. Okay, so now we're going from the sublime to the ridiculous. Here's the sublime to the ridiculous. The vote to condemn anti-Semitism that the Democrats put up. And this Omar lady,
Well, yeah. Well, we may have different takes on this.
I think so. Go ahead.
A little bit.
Go ahead, I'm listening.
Well, first-term Congresswoman Ilhan Omar from Minnesota, a Democrat, has, stepped in it with anti-Semitic remarks. I don't know how else you could call them over the last, she's only been there since January 5th. I mean, it's only 2 months. This is usually the period where you're starting up your constituent service, and you're sponsoring your first bill, and you're finding where the bathroom is.
Yeah.
And she's already managed to have 3 or 4 anti-Semitic comments, the latest being, something about, Israel supporters having allegiance to another country. Mm. And she'd had one a week before about support of Israel was all about the Benjamins, implying that's the only reason people would support Israel. I mean, I think clearly she's speaking the language of anti-Semitism now. The question is, what do you do about it? The first time Pelosi took her to the woodshed, she met with Pelosi. She issued a statement of regret. She had a whole back and forth with the New York Times' Barry Weiss about how she was going to try to learn more. And then, more of this. Obviously, it didn't stick.
Apparently not. Your point.
Yeah. Did not stick. My point is now, what do you do? Do you do a general anti-Semitic resolution that is just kind of generic? Do you do one just aimed at her? What about this latest thing Jim Jordan was spelling?
Yeah.
Right. Of course, Kevin McCarthy had done one of those, Bloomberg style Soros things a few months ago. I don't have a good answer. I don't know. I tend to find the resolutions a little, they're sort of umbrage theater. I don't know how much they do. I think they were good in the case of Steve King because they stripped him of committees, and that really...
that silenced him.
defenestrated him. Yeah. I
So,
mean, take away.
so is that what you're saying? You're saying that enough with this crazy, it's not good enough to just do the Democratic resolution on anti-Semitism without naming her, by the way, which it doesn't, the resolution, and that they should go full steam ahead. And I think she's dangerous to not just, because she's an anti-Semite, and she is, Matt. And I think, and her whole reason for getting into Congress, I'm sure, was to push, her beliefs. But I say that, she's got cover with AOC and Tlaib are covering her. I find this something that needs to be nipped in the bud, but I've been saying that for week after week after week. I do think the Democratic Party has a problem with anti-Semitism. Not to say that the Republican Party doesn't have its own version.
I understand what you're saying.
But I think this gives, now, how pro-Israel I am, but this gives cover to Trump to play it as a wedge issue. And
okay, so you're Halli Pelosi.
Yeah, and
what do?
I'm saying this girl's got to be shut up.
Well, what does that mean? I mean, you can't kick her out of Congress.
No, but you can send her. You can strip her of committee, and you can silence her, and you can let everybody else know you play this game, and we are not tolerating this, and that will be the way that will be. End of conversation. That's what you do. You got to be tough. You got to be tough. And I know what she's doing. This. Pelosi is clearly, she's got to keep everybody happy. But you know what? No, she doesn't.
Yeah, I mean,
no, she doesn't. Because you know what? There's a lot of Jewish money coming into that party, and it's going to stop.
Yeah, look, believe me, anybody knows that. That's, going to be Nancy, who's the champion fundraiser.
So I do think that to play it the way the Republicans have always played it, I don't think it's acceptable from the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party is moving too far to the left, and it is definitely anti-Israel and anti-Semitic, that left wing. And it is very much pro everything that Louis Farrakhan ever taught. And I have to tell you something that I don't know that anybody else is willing to say this. I'm going to say this. In the black community.
Oh, boy. Stand back. Whenever it starts, nobody's willing to say this. And then in the black community.
I don't have to say anything more. There is an issue in the black community of being extremely, having identified with the Palestinians. There's a lot of that they don't understand, because I talked to a few of these people. I've got followers who are constantly on me with this stuff. And, the last people to know you're anti-Semites are anti-Semites, by the way. But this Farrakhan thing, and I still say it goes back to Barack Obama. I fault him all the way, because I think he played all of this to his black base. And unleashed, something that was not to be unleashed, since World War II. And now we have this rise of anti-Semitism. I wrote it in my book, A Year in My Pajamas with President Obama. I am telling you, this is an issue. And so much of the Democratic Party is that, the black community. And I think there needs to be some conversation here. And that's why I think Nancy needs to shut all of this up and down right now while she can, while she's got the power to do it. Otherwise, I think Trump takes this and runs with it. That's what I think.
I hear where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I don't quite see it that way. I mean, look, I think there's no question that the kind of base of the party is not into supporting Bibi and is not happy with Israeli policies and is J Street or left. And that's going to eventually catch up to the Congressional Party, which is still, kind of pro-Israel and AIPAC-ish in its nature. And, I think that's a real cleavage in the party. The question for the candidates is, what do you do? What do you do about it? And I think the presidentials are going to take the lead here. We're going to see where they come down.
Just remember, AIPAC, Israel, Judaism, never a wedge issue. Everybody on both sides of the aisle were on the same page. That changed. And that is a big mistake for Israel, for Jews, for everybody.
Well, unless you listen to the Nixon tapes, but yeah.
Well, my point being, that may be individuals, but for the grand world stage, America was on one side, Israel's side. And it wasn't, and that after World War II. And that's where it remained until. And I think that to turn this into a Republican or versus a Democrat is a very dangerous thing. And it may be a failure on the part of AIPAC not having the power that it had, and that may come from, that other crazy group of left-wingers who started the other Israel.
The J Street?
The J Street. That may have been part of it too. But I'm saying this is not a good thing. The fact of the matter is, if you want to play it as terms of foreign affairs, you can look at everybody else. Israel is still, a democratic society, more or less, as far as the Middle East is concerned.
You don't have to convince me of that.
I understand.
Absolutely.
It's all right. So, we'll be back on this one, I'm sure. I don't want to,
I agree. It's, clearly Omar has forced this issue.
Right. Okay. And so it's not a good thing. Nancy, if you're listening, I tell you, shut her down now. That's it. And everybody will learn you can't do it. Okay. We're almost out of time, but there are just too many good things to keep on going. So we're going to just keep on going.
We'll do a lightning round. We'll just whip through.
We'll see what we come up with. Poll numbers to the moon all of a sudden. Not just with the thing, but up 43%, I think I read in some, 44. These poll numbers are kind of weird, though, as far as I'm concerned, because then you ask specific questions, and everybody thinks that he's a wackadoodle and that he's, guilty as hell.
Right.
So the polls are kind of just a very strange thing. But the only reason I brought it up is because I hope that what happened with Clinton doesn't happen here, and that is they beat on him so badly that after a while everybody started to feel sorry for the guy and said, leave the little dude alone.
Well, that could definitely happen. The Dems could overplay their hand.
Right.
On the other hand, he's at that number and the economy is pretty strong. A little economy softening, and that could really go down.
Well, economy is softening. There are some things that have come out in the last week that are just, a little bit whatever. So, that we'll have to wait to see.
But super soft. Yeah.
Super soft, yeah. Let's go to Mueller. Not much coming out of there. Everybody's still waiting to see if there are going to be some more indictments. But I do think it's interesting that Trump's lawyer, Ty Cobb, calls him a hero. And then the second thing that happened there, that Barr won't recuse himself from the Mueller probe. All of this is very dicey. Oh my God, dicey. But the big story that I think we should discuss before we go at it, and that's Mr. Roger Stone. Can I just ask you a question about?
Yeah, in terms of how to manage your judge, not ideal.
First of all, how do you not tell that you got a book?
That seems like a bit of an omission.
And what's with the attorneys there, Matt?
You're putting crosshairs on her, picture on her. That alone, I can't believe he stayed out of jail for that.
Well, yeah, this woman's got to have the patience of Job to put up with this. But I don't
think she wants to martyr him.
Well, at this point, he's begging, honey. He's begging. Put me in jail.
He must want to go, assuming he's not going in forever. He has to do a little time though.
Yeah,
for his brand. I don't know. I think there's always the interesting question of does he flip for all his tough talk?
Well,
does he flip? Or does he think he's got a pardon?
If he wants to go to jail, would it be more apt to be able to say, if I flip and I'm in jail, they can't get me there? Or he wants to go to jail. These are absolutely, you couldn't ask more. Today they shut down 2 of his websites. Matt, this is a guy who's smart enough to know if you did what he did in the last couple of days, you're going to jail. So
there's jail and there's prison.
Well, he's going to the pokey. They're going to put him in the pokey. They're going to do to him what they do for it.
He's going to have to sit tight. Yeah.
So I'm just saying that there is something, both men handled this the same way. And I'm wondering why.
Well, you could say hubris. just to, for Manafort violating all their paroles, you could say it's cockiness because they know a pardon is coming.
I think that's sick.
Plausible.
Everything is plausible.
Right? You wouldn't put that beyond Trump, right?
Yeah. Just like I said, I find this whole thing quite astonishing on Stone's part. He can't possibly be stupid. So we know.
And how much vulnerability does Jared and Don Jr. have? That's the other great question.
Well,
and for what?
Well, look, let's get back to that very important point about that little strange part about the fact that old Jared, couldn't get clearance. Failed at it twice or 3 times, and then the father gives it to him. The father-in-law gives it to him, and everybody's so up in arms about it that they write notes about it to say.
They write the cover your ass memos, right?
And there he is. Look, and then there's the MBS part of it.
Yes, he's putting together Middle East peace. What could go wrong?
he is so compromised, this kid. And, they've had so much money and gotten so much money out of the Saudis. This is not going to end pretty. But I think the last thing I read about that today was that, they're going to stonewall. They're not going to give over anything that they're asking for the kid. He's no kid at this point. And then, of course, there's Ivanka, but I don't want to talk about her because then I'll have to do my Marilyn happy birthday to you voice.
Lana Turner.
I'm not going there. So, I think there's a story. I think there's going to be some wide open stuff with the son-in-law and the son and Junior. That's what I think. And so that's why I don't think any of this is over, because I think there's going to be more rolling down the pike on that. You agree?
You would think they're in the crosshairs. I just don't know. Again, the committee's going to pound him on the Trump organization. And what does Mueller have? I don't know. I'm told Junior has much worse legal exposure than Jared.
I would agree with
Jared's had better lawyers. Jared's taken care to protect himself more. He's got more plausible deniability on things. Not so much with little Trumpy.
Jared's smarter than little Trumpy, too.
Yeah, he's not that smart, but he's smarter.
Right, he's definitely smarter. There's no question about it. I want to bring this up, too, real quickly. The word socialism.
Oh, yes. We're in a big cover of New York Magazine.
This is not good. This is another place where Trump is outwitting the Democrats before the 2020 even begins to start. He's got an issue, and they gave it to him. Let's go back to Israel, by the way. This is another reason why they need to nip Israel in the bud. Okay, you talk. Mommy, quiet.
Yeah, well, look, I don't think socialism is popular. I don't think it's popular label. I don't think the policies that are attached to it, very high tax rates to pay for universal four-year public education, college education, Medicare for all. I don't think those will prove popular. I think there'll be big setbacks in the name socialism. But, it's
well, they're playing into his hands, the Dems. They always
It has a lot of cachet, and by the way, if you're 30 years old or 25 years old and your memory of the last 15 years is the financial crisis, you can sort of understand why socialism might have some appeal.
So Mr. Trump sent me an email this afternoon, just before, actually this tonight, which says 2020, 90% proposed tax rate. This is what the Dems want. Wide open borders, full-term abortion, ripping away Second Amendment rights, government-run health care, and full-blown socialism. Full-blown socialism. So there you have it. There's the ticket items that he's going after for the 2020, should he survive long enough to be their nominee. And we end on this, because I think this is extraordinary. Yeah. FBI Director Christopher Wray says foreign influence campaigns targeting U.S. have continued virtually unabated. Now, whose fault is that?
Well, it's the president's Congress, which is silly enough to, strengthen our defensive stuff. This is what the intelligence community is putting against since 2016. It's continued. Well, first of all, you got all this media interruptions, and then you've got the actual attacks on voting sites. So I think it's quite worrisome.
I think it's quite worrisome, and I think it gets down to the buck stops with Trump, and Trump doesn't want it to abate because it helps him.
That would make sense. That's certainly what our intelligence community concluded about 2016. No reason to stop, but whatever happened, 2018 proved to be a Democratic year, so doesn't mean they're not attacking.
They have different ways and different reasons for attacking. I think they're looking for the executive branch. They're not looking for the little guy. I think that their power is in.
I don't know why you'd skip one, but.
Well, I don't think they skipped. I just don't think it's.
Why not keep Dana Rohrabacher around?
Well, because he was an idiot and he was overused and he was overblown. I think there was that too. I mean, maybe, they were looking for new blood to get in there. Who knows? I don't know. I just know this. I do know this fail on the part of the president. Another big fail among many big fails, but I take that. It should be on the front page of every newspaper in America right now, and people should be insane about it.
It should be. It's not, but it should be.
Could be.
It could be. Could be. All right, and on that note,
Matthew.
We will see you next week.
Next week, darling. You are listening to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show posts new podcasts Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern at hallicasserjayne.com and is available wherever you listen to your podcasts. Be sure to find me on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeart Podcasts, on all your favorite apps. You can find the Halli Casser-Jayne Show on your Alexa device, too. Just say the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. Oh, and come play with me on Twitter at the Halli CJ Show. In his fascinating book, T.R.'s Last War, Theodore Roosevelt, The Great War, and a Journey of Triumph and Tragedy, in his lively, witty, blow-by-blow style, historian David Pietruszas captures through the lens of the bull moose the 1916 presidential campaign, America's entry into the Great War in 1917, Woodrow Wilson's presidency, and the last years of one of American history's greatest men, Theodore Roosevelt. Pietruszas not only transports readers with his dramatic portraits of T.R., his hated rival Wilson, and politics in wild flux, but also poignantly chronicles the horrific price a family pays in war. Roosevelt is a towering Greek god of war, but Greek gods begat Greek tragedies. Let's talk about that and more with historian David Pietruszas. So, for those who don't know, and there might be a generation of listeners out there, David, who don't, who was Theodore Roosevelt, and from whence did he come? Let's give a little background before we get into the meat and bones of this. By the way, just deliciously written book. I have to tell you that because history books can be like, this is fun. This is interesting. This is you hit it a home run here. I just wanted to put that in there. But back to Theodore.
Well, Theodore was the 26th president of the United States of America, the trust buster, the rough rider, the police commissioner of New York City, rancher in the Badlands, explorer of the Amazon, killer of just about everything south of the Sahara in Africa on his expedition there, winner of the Nobel Peace Prize for settling the Russo-Japanese War, the great architect of the Panama Canal. So he was an active guy, and probably our most literary president. A lot of these guys, a lot of famous guys nowadays don't write their own books. He wrote his own books. He wrote a ton of them. He wrote them when he was young. He wrote them when he was old. He edited a magazine. He had a newspaper column. So he was just always busy. The strenuous life really applied to him, that term.
Let me quote something that you wrote in your acknowledgement. I like to read people's acknowledgments. Writing about Theodore Roosevelt is like scaling a mountain that doubles in elevation every 48 hours. Suffice it to say, there's a lot of mountain out there. This guy was a mountain of a man. A mountain of books have been written about him. Why did you decide to add to that mountain when you sat down? What did you think you could add?
Well, because that mountain doubles and keeps doubling. So even if you've got like a 3-volume biography of him, and there are a lot of big ones even when they're not multi-volume, you're exhausted by him by the time you get to the end. By the time you get past 1912 and the Amazon, it's like, okay, we have to wrap this up. We have to stop killing trees. Your editor will tell you. So you sort of rush past that, and there's a lot of story in there, and the subtitle Triumph and Tragedy is real because the tragedy is there. He has to triumph over his previous political missteps and over his declining health. For a number of reasons, it's declining. The tragedy of the death of his youngest and most beloved son, Quentin, in World War I, in a war he wanted and argued for and wanted to fight in personally and wanted to die in personally. So there's a lot going on there. And, of course, his great rivalry with Woodrow Wilson.
Yeah,
where
we'll
he
talk
runs
about that. Let's wait. Let's hold off on that.
Okay.
Because I want to get into that because I think that's an interesting part of his existence. Time passes. Legends grow. I don't have to tell you that, and particularly in these days, we all know that. Has he been over-celebrated, or has he been misrepresented, or did people miss the mark on what really was the most potent part of his contribution to humanity?
Presidents go up and down in popularity. I think right now we're in a big large time of interest in the Revolutionary War period, the colonial period, the early republic, witnessed by Hamilton. And the Roosevelts kind of go up and down in popularity. For a long time, Franklin was the big dog when I was younger. All the big biographies of him. Then Eleanor seemed to supplant Franklin. And then Theodore came back with a rush for a while. And in 2018, 2019, we were dealing with the centenary of a lot of different things. The end of World War I, his death at the beginning of 2019. I was surprised that there weren't more books coming out by him. So he's going kind of up and down, but I think he's still remarkably popular. People see him as transforming the presidency from the administrator of what Congress would have disposed, under guys like Cleveland and Benjamin Harrison and Hayes and Garfield. He says, what the Constitution doesn't prohibit, the president can do. I can do that. And depending on who the president is now, you either like that idea or it scares the hell out of you.
You think?
So maybe it wasn't the best idea in the world. But he does so much, and he's so active, and it's his personality too. It's not just a question of what he does. And timing is everything. Okay. Location in real estate, and timing in politics in particularly because he can go out there and you can watch him in motion pictures if you can't visit him or he can't visit, your home state. The phonograph record comes out as a campaign tool when he's running, and people can hear the candidates or famous people's voices. So we have more of a record of him than we do of any preceding president. Okay. And that, that helps jump up, Franklin Roosevelt. It helps jump up, Kennedy again. So when you get these technological advances, which TR wasn't crazy about, when they asked him to make a recording in 1914 of his campaign, I think Henry Cabot Lodge asked him, he says, "What do you want me to do? Do a little dance for the films as besides that?" But, he was not normally shy, shall we say.
He was a mountain of a man. We both know that. And so much so, by the way, his face winds up on a mountain, Mount Rushmore. Tell us about that, because that's a funny story I heard you tell, how he got his face carved into that mountain.
We got location. We got timing, and it's not what you know, it's who you know. And who he knew and who knew him was Gutzon Borglum, the fellow who carved Mount Rushmore. So the first three guys are sort of a no-brainer: Jefferson, Lincoln, Washington, and Wilson. With Roosevelt, the jury was still sort of out maybe in the 1920s, although he was very popular in the 20s. His popularity arose, with the America going into World War I and him being proven right on preparedness, and everyone getting all sorts of patriotic in those times. But Gutzon Borglum was a progressive, not just a small p progressive, but a big P progressive, a bull moose progressive, a supporter and friend of Theodore Roosevelt. He just loved Roosevelt. I mean, they'd have their little spats and all there. But when TR dies, Borglum, who, interestingly enough, the straight line between ideologies from now into the past is not always so straight. It's very crookeds. So Mr. Progressive Gutzon Borglum was also one of the top dogs in the Ku Klux Klan. In the 1920s, he's the fellow who carved Stone Mountain, Georgia, the memorial to the Confederacy. Like to see a cover up that one. But he also, when TR dies, wants to carve a giant equestrian statue of Theodore Roosevelt on the Palisades in New Jersey. So, imagine driving across the George Washington Bridge to Jersey and seeing Theodore Roosevelt on horseback every day in larger than life form.
I'm from there, by the way. We do have that of George Washington in Englewood, where I grew up. There's a big, but I love this story. But I also, you make the point. He was a Republican.
Yes.
We can look at the part, as you said, there's no straight line to the past and to where we are today. So I'm not sure where that takes us. Also, he did run at one point, right, on as a progressive, or was certainly wanting to move mountains on that too. So what didn't you like about him?
I think I really do, well, two things. One is really taking the presidency and the executive department into a new form where the powers are extended to where they are now, which can often be, the executive orders and an executive overreach.
Right.
Okay, there's a real danger to that.
You think?
I would hope that all ideologies would recognize that and recognize it no matter who's in charge, no matter who's occupying the White House. There was a reason for the separation of powers in the Constitution and making it so that occasionally there would be deadlocks where it wouldn't be easy to do things, where you couldn't rush things through, and where you needed some form of consensus, actually a lot of consensus and limitations even on the powers of the federal government vis-a-vis the states. The other thing is this warlike militaristic mode that he's in almost all the time, where he wants to go to war in the 1880s and 1890s, not just with Spain over Cuba and the battleship Maine, but also over with Germany over a dispute in Samoa, or with Great Britain over a dispute in South America. And that he says, well, we could finally annex Canada. He gives an address in 1896, I think, to the Naval War College, where he says none of the achievements of peacetime can equal the glories of war. It's one of the more remarkable pro-war speeches ever. And of course, ironic, there's irony. There's a lot of irony with this guy, with everybody, really, in that, we really don't go to war when he's president. Okay? He's very bloodthirsty in a lot of ways, but yet we don't go to war. We don't get entangled in things like World War I or foreign affairs or like Woodrow Wilson even in Mexico later. And he settles the Russo-Japanese War and wins the Nobel Peace Prize. So this great, most militaristic of American presidents wins the Nobel Peace Prize. But overall, he's just so jingoistic and beating the war drums that I find that very disturbing.
Very Republican. That hasn't left.
Well, back in those days, the Republican Party was far more, things keep flipping and flipping and flipping.
Right. I get that.
So in say 1940, the Republican Party is much more isolationist, and Franklin Roosevelt more interventionist.
Right.
So it's very gingerly about it, of course. But in around 1900, you see the Republicans being arrayed against the Democrats in what was called anti-imperialism. And that meant, like, maybe we shouldn't be involved in Cuba, or maybe we shouldn't be fighting a war to pacify the Philippines, or how long will we keep the Philippines? So the Democrats are very much isolationist, although I don't think that term was invented then. And the Republicans, with, the Spanish-American War, keeping the Philippines, are much more interventionist.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I love history so much, because it's really fun to watch that yin and the yang, and how, and it's always subtle.
Right.
Right? It's always subtle, and so you don't quite see it coming, and then there it is. But that's the politicians. There's always the people, too, which is, we could have a whole conversation about that.
A lot of personnel is policy.
Exactly. And I find that fascinating. And I don't think that statement is made enough, by the way, right?
If you've ever been on city council like I have, you know that.
Well, I know that, but I'm saying, right. But I mean, personality, I think at this point where we are today has become it all. I think the rest
a lot. And
yes.
people choose up sides. Well, also it's people choosing up sides.
Well, that too.
Once you've chosen up a side, then
hard to get off the mark.
What was black was now white, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. So being a Jersey girl, Woodrow Wilson, I can't talk today. Oh, God. 28th President of the United States. And these two had a very fascinating friendship or ex-bromance, or Wilson a skunk. Talk to me about these two, because I think that's a fascinating thing. I always like to watch how men interact with one another, particularly in the political world. Talk to me.
I was quite surprised to learn in writing this book how close their relationship had been and how long-standing. They share a platform in the 1890s in Baltimore talking for municipal reform. They're both progressives. They're both intellectuals. So they've got that in common, even though there is the divide of the parties. Although ideologically, at one point, they are kind of the same in the 1890s because they're both anti-William Jennings Bryan. Obviously, the Republicans were, and the Eastern Democrats were. When TR becomes president after the assassination of McKinley, and he rushes down to Buffalo to be sworn in, one of the first people he sees there is remarkably Woodrow Wilson, who's coming back from a vacation in Ontario. They keep in touch. When Wilson is made president of Princeton, TR thinks this is one of the greatest things ever, and he writes to Wilson about that. He writes to Grover Cleveland about that. But Wilson starts sniping publicly and privately at TR in the course of TR's presidency. TR backs away from that. They should become really bitter enemies when they run against each other for president, you think, okay, but they don't, because TR is so busy hating William Howard Taft that year. He doesn't notice how much he hates Woodrow Wilson, but he's going to be a quick learner. And what really sets him off is not World War I, not preparedness, not Wilson stealing his thunder, really, on the progressive movement and enacting far more things than TR ever did. His record is really kind of limited on that. It's Wilson who has a wider range of progressive measures enacted. But it's that Panama Canal we mentioned. That's TR's baby. That's a great accomplishment in terms of projecting America onto the world stage, naval power. And it's just a great engineering feat. It's an eighth wonder of the world. But how did TR accomplish that? Basically by setting up a coup against the Colombian government, which owned Panama at that time. And when Wilson takes power, he's going to propose a treaty with Colombia, giving them some extra cash and essentially apologizing for what the United States did in setting Panama free so that they could do business with us on our terms. And what that is apologizing for what Theodore Roosevelt did. And from that moment on, it's off to the races with TR versus Woodrow Wilson.
That part of the book, guys, you're going to love. You need to read it. He came from enormous wealth, and that's true of many presidents. Not all of them translate that well as leaders, because they haven't had to live. This guy seemed to have a lot of empathy and understanding. When he grew up, let me say, because I don't think we addressed this, he wasn't well as a kid, so to speak. He started in ill health. This is an emotional creature, and that's so wonderful to see in a presidency. Am I wrong in reading that in there?
He doesn't. He comes from a family of philanthropists. There's a lot of genetics in this book,
sure,
and genealogy, And his father and his relatives had been funders of many of the great civic institutions in New York City. So he has that sense of responsibility, noblesse oblige, whatever you would call it, where you give back, where those who have been blessed have to give back to their fellow man. And TR is a part of this. And when he goes into the assembly at, I think, age 22, hello, Ocasio-Cortez, you're an old-timer compared to Theodore Roosevelt, okay? And he becomes leader of the Republicans in the assembly like the next year at age 23. Although he must have rubbed them the wrong way, because when they retake the majority the next year, they had single-year terms then, they turned to somebody else. I think that's very telling that he did not wear well or play well with others, okay? So he does that, and when he's in the assembly, he sees certain measures for civic reform, for the reform of people working in not sweatshops, but piecework at home, and what the conditions would be for that overturned. And he gets very upset with that. Also, as police commissioner of the city of New York, he makes an acquaintance with Jacob Riis, the great Danish-American reformer, photographer, the fellow who wrote How the Other Half Lives, about what life was like in the most densely populated place on earth, the Lower East Side. And he wants to do something about that. And because of Riis, and also because he's just roaming around areas where patrician folks don't as police commissioner, because he's keeping tabs. He's really keeping tabs on the police, not only for corruption, but incompetence and being out of shape and not being trained. And so, he's going around these dives and slums, rapping on literally sleeping policemen, and seeing a lot of how the other half lives in that regard. So he does care about them. And he's also famously always involved in crossing the class barrier and the religious barrier. Like when he has Booker T. Washington to the White House, when he first becomes presidency, causing quite a ruckus with a lot of Americans, particularly in the white South, with Catholic archbishops and prelates, and cowboys and ranch hands and boxers and people like that. He seemed to be able to mix with just about anybody.
Yeah, and see, that fascinates me about him. I want to say that he also started the National Park Service, and my listeners know that I did a book with Antietam National Battlefield in the National Park Service. So this is a big baby for me. I love that about him. Let me take it to here as we get to close, which is, there's a little tidbit. Roosevelt's second wife, Edith, and what people may not know, but it's part of his story, that when his first wife passed away, he was so destroyed by her death that he went off to the Badlands in Dakota Territory for 2 years. His second wife burned their personal letters. Did you find out anything about that?
No, and that's not super unusual.
But it is fascinating because, I don't know if it says more about her or if it says something about him or both. I don't know.
I think it says something about the times. Now, obviously, there was more going on in the relationship with Warren and Florence Harding, but she does the same thing
right.
in the 1920s, and which really gets all the conspiracy people up in arms. With TR and Edith, Edith was she was the strong silent type, the great silent partner in that relationship. So I think she would have wanted to maintain silence, and there are hints of a sort of marital raciness.
Oh?
Occasionally, not in what she's writing, but in some of TR's when he's writing, I think even to his children about, being a great lover with your mother and all that. It's like, whoa, what's he go? But this is more information that I need, okay? So maybe in the letters they were, not quite Victorian. Who knew? Or maybe they were just sharing data. He's traveling so much during their marriage to Africa, They're separated to the Amazon, to, just all on the campaign trail, and she has to mind the store. She has to pay all the bills and raise the children. But there's probably a huge, and he wrote that we know of officially 150,000 letters. He's always writing letters. God knows what he put in them to her, who he would have unburdened himself most about other people say. It's like that Henry Cabot Lodge. He's a jerk. I don't know.
It's interesting because I don't know that we'll have that kind of archive. Because were they going to archive emails?
No,
LOL.
We just subpoena them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's really rather sad. Larger than life. That's the only way that that's how I've always perceived him. But I perceived a lot from pre-1950 as our great leaders being larger than life, and I don't think we necessarily have measured up as time goes on to that kind of huge character.
He's really kaleidoscopic. There are so many aspects to his life, which people recognized at the time, and you can't get around it. He's probably not only the most interesting president, he's probably the most interesting American.
Yeah, so I guess we leave it with they just sure don't make them like they used to, darling. Oh, God. Hey, love the book. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. I've been speaking with David Pietruszas. His book is TR's Last War, Theodore Roosevelt, The Great War, and a Journey of Triumph and Tragedy. For more information on the book, visit David Pietruszas and follow David on Twitter at @DPietruszas. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show is a production of Resec, LLC. Be sure to tune in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show at hallicasserjayne.com or listen on your favorite app. New podcasts are posted Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern.